Awesome. Thank you again, Amy June, for coming and doing yet another awesome Gift of Open Source contribution workshop today. Today we are covering the track queue for WordPress, which I'm so personally excited to learn about. And I'm going to drop in the chat a link to the resources that Amy June has put together. And with that, I'm just going to hand it over to Amy June and let her get started.
Okay, so yes, that document that Tara is going to link to, and then we'll attach it to the recording as well. It's a list of just really kind of just a quick, I give links at the bottom of some of the slides, and this is just an easy way for you folks to like kind of get to those resources really quick. So we are going to look at the WordPress issue queue. And for those that might be coming over from Drupal or new to the WordPress issue queue, it is called Trac. That's TRAC. And this is going to be that 1,000-foot view of kind of what it's all about and how to get started. I am Amy June Heinlein. You can call me Amy June, never Amy, never June, just always Amy June. I work with Canopy Studios and we are partner with Pantheon, which is a nice relationship. I'm the community ambassador and QA engineer over there. And I love working in the community. I have a really wonderful job. I have the privilege of getting paid to give back. And one of my favorite things about giving back is teaching people how to give back. I organize local events. I'm in the San Francisco Bay Area, so I help with San Francisco Drupal Users Group and Bay Area Drupal Camp, that's Bad Camp. I help with some more larger events like DrupalCon and WordCamp US. I'm on the community working group team on the Drupal side of things. I am a hospice nurse. I've been nursing for a long time, and accessibility is a passion of mine. I help organize a couple of non-code things, one of them being Ally Talks, A11Y Talks, where we talk about accessibility from month to month. And I'm also a core mentor for Drupal contributions. And I'm a Pantheon hero, and I love to say that I'm a Pantheon hero because they give great resources for folks. They give little to-dos and little side quests that you can do, and I really enjoy working with the people at Pantheon. And I do this at the beginning of each presentation about why we give back to open source. If you depend on open source depends on you. That's the guilt part of it. But contributing makes us feel good. You know, the more you contribute, the more you learn, the more you contribute, our projects move closer to perfection. From a typo in the user interface to a bug that creates a white screen of death, all of those client-facing, user-facing errors and bugs are really important for all of us to fix. They add validity to our projects, and no contribution is too small. And giving back to open source kind of gives you some street cred for whatever platform you're working on. We create profile pages, and folks can look at those profile pages and see what we do in the community. It helps build your resume. You can list all of these things as volunteer opportunities that you do for your open source projects. So today, again, we're going to be looking at the track, and I'm going to read the agenda for ADA purposes. We'll just kind of glance at a WordPress.org profile and see what it looks like. We'll talk about the core contributor handbook. And we'll do that track overview with some images and talking about some keywords and definitions to sort of get you used to that workflow and what you see on those tickets. We'll take a look at search and custom queries, and we'll look at the navigating the community guide, and then we'll do a tour. So the slide decks might be, I'll provide links in the slide deck and short descriptions, but we'll really get a broader and better look at things, once we go on that kind of the tour at the end. So here's an example of a WordPress.org profile, and I use mine just for ease. And I think my gardener's here, so I might have to put my headphones on with my microphone in a minute, but we'll see. I hear the lawnmower. So you can see in my profile, It has a profile picture. It has my contribution history, which is sort of nice. You know, you can see that I've been tagged as a WordCamp organizer and that I speak at WordCamps. And the more things that you contribute to, the more your profile populates. You know, if you're a plugin developer, you'll get a special icon for that. If you help with the core team, you know, and so people can look at this and really see how important contribution is to you. So what is Trac? Trac is open source web-based project management. It tracks our bugs. It sort of parallels our workflow when we work for agencies. It's used by many of the parts and components of the WordPress project, you know, including, you know, things like theme review, Gutenberg, core, meta groups. Trac is based on working in tickets. You know, there's a certain workflow that we go through with tickets. And when we give back to the Trac and use the Trac, we leverage these tools, you know. We can monitor progress on tickets, and we can contribute patches and attach them to tickets for core. It's used both not only for feature development and road mapping, but it's also used for bug reports, things like UI fixes, typos, accessibility, you know, user experience. All different things are tracked in these tickets. And anyone can use this system if you've created a WordPress.org account. That's sort of probably the only prerequisite. So I want to talk about the core contributor handbook, and you can see the link at the bottom. It's make.wordpress.org core/handbook. And I'm going to talk about the 4 major components of this handbook. I'm not going to talk a lot about it because it's something we can all explore on our own. Contribute with testing. Testing is really important for any sort of project. And it's important for release cycles as well. You can install the latest versions of the code base locally to test all of these new features and how the changes work with your site setup. You know, kind of do some beta testing. If you have certain plugins used, you can see how the new release works with your plugins and provide feedback, because the only way our engineers know how we use the product is to report these things. You know, not everyone has every different scenario on their machine. So testing is really important. You can start testing in the alpha phase of the release process and continue through the release process to make sure that it's as bug-free as possible. You don't need code. You don't need to know how to code. You don't even need to know how to create a patch to submit a bug report. And like I said, next week we're going to go into, you know, more details on how to do that. You just need some steps that detail the issue. You know, keep it short and concise, and you want some steps to reproduce and then steps to validate. You can confirm that that patches work. Once it's been committed, you can report security vulnerabilities. But the thing with security vulnerabilities is we don't want those made public. So WordPress really wants people to be responsible and report any sort of security updates directly to the security team, because you don't want it, you know, out in public, because then you make the vulnerability known. Contribution with code. Contributing code is a fantastic way to improve WordPress. You know, reporting one bug or providing a patch to fix it, or maybe even just being involved in maintaining some of the individual components. And we'll look at what the components mean when we look at the queue. This contribution with code section covers the code base and how it's structured. It also goes in depth about the code repositories and the Trac queue as well. So you want some further information on the queue. Design decisions and fixing bugs within WordPress are also outlined in this section. And here's my gardener. So on come the headphones, because real life, you know. Okay. Can everyone still hear me?
Sure thing. Yep.
Okay, great. So where was I? Best practices.
Like any open source community, WordPress has standardized best practices, which are conveniently documented as well, which makes it really nice. It keeps these best practices, like most of the projects that we work in, they keep the code base consistent, predictable, and understandable by the community. So this section of the handbook covers coding standards, not only for PHP and JavaScript, but also for CSS and HTML, because every open source project and repository has its own set of best practices. This section also discusses APIs and the best practices to follow when writing patches. So this is another good resource for giving back to the Trac queue. Tutorials and guides. Are you new to WordPress development and code? This section includes a number of tutorials and guides to help get people up and running. It goes into how to set up WordPress for local development using VVV or any of the many open source tools like Lando or DDEV and things like that. You know, how to install a local server, how to install version control. You know, maintainers use Subversion, but contributors can use Git. And there's also more details about how to better understand how to work with Trac. You know, the tutorials and guides section probably has what you're looking for to get started. Okay, so here's an image of a Trac, of some tickets in Trac. Again, it's the official record of work in WordPress core. All these tickets are around for forever, for longevity. You know, they become sort of a historical document of open source contributions for WordPress. And because of this, the tone and language and content style we use is important. We should be formal and to the point. And there is a new content style guide. I don't have a link to that because I just saw it on Twitter just the other day. So, you know, making sure, like, just as we have coding standards and best practices for the code, we also have best practices and a tone for the issue queue as well. We want to be sure before we file new issues that it doesn't already have an existing ticket for the bug or feature. If it already exists, we want to make sure that we add notes to the existing issue. You know, it could be that you're using it a little bit different, or, you know, you can validate that the previous person's, you have the same results as the previous person. Remember that contributors are volunteers and the process takes time. So be patient when working with the queue. You might not get answers right away. Especially if it's something like a feature request, it could take a little while to get into the released cycle. So here's an image of an individual ticket rather than just that 1,000-foot view. And we'll look at this closer when we do the demo, and I'll be able to like highlight with my cursor the different aspects of what we're talking about. But I want to talk a little bit about the definitions. We do have a ticket ID number. You know, this populates once you enter the node, and we use this number to link the ticket between other tickets. There's a type of ticket. You know, there's a bug ticket. That's where something wrong and it needs to be fixed. There are enhancements or feature requests, and enhancements an existing feature that could use a little bit of improvement, like maybe an additional modification or hook, whereas a feature request is not currently represented in WordPress or in another Trac. There's tasks. This option won't appear when filing a ticket. This is for feature requests once they've been accepted. People can sort of bless these tickets and then they become tasks. Milestones, these are where they're at in their development phase. It's set by default to waiting review, and we'll go through a bunch of these milestones later. You can set the severity of a ticket. You know, is it a blocker? Is it a critical fix? Is it minor, like a typo? Only trusted members, maintainers of core have the ability to modify the severity of a ticket. There's components, and we'll look at a drop down of all the different components that we have. There's focuses. This might be something like a focus on user experience or accessibility or the templating system. Priority, how soon should we look at these tickets? You know, there's the version, because not everyone's using the most current version of WordPress. So if you have a bug in a prior release, make sure you specify which version that bug is in. Keywords, they're a little bit like tags, and they're used to track the current status of the tickets. And I go into this in depth in a couple of slides. Description, now this is really kind of the heart of the ticket and the summary. You should be thorough, but succinct. You should be as specific as possible. Again, and I do say some of this stuff because it's important, so I iterate. If it's a bug, make sure that you include the steps to reproduce the issue. And then once it's fixed, what you expect to happen. You can include attachments on the tickets like files or screenshots. Once the ticket goes into the life cycle, you can attach patches or diff files. The change history, this is kind of the commenting system, and this is where a conversation happens in collaboration. It is open by default. And really, before you post anything, or say you're working on an existing issue where you found a bug, you should really kind of scan through that change history and see what people are talking about, and read it all the way through before you begin to work on it, to see if your approach has already been tried. Okay, so there's a number of different ways you can sort the track, and I'm going to read this for ADA. There's the summary, a reporter, a component, priority, severity, milestone, type, and workflow. Those are sort of the components we looked at in the last image. Sometimes finding something to work on, if you don't already have a bug, is one of the most challenging parts. But the track queue makes it easy by having a way to custom query. So in addition to the report, the queries are used to display tickets that meet specified criteria. To configure and execute a query, you can switch to the view tickets, and we'll look at that link when we open the track queue. And it's in the navigation bar. So here's an image, and again, we'll look at it a little closer when we do the demo, but this is an image of what a custom query looks like. You can see that there are a number of ways to refine the search. The filters, you can add a filter, and it, opens up a conditional field, and you have select boxes that will refine the search a little bit more. And you can have filters and columns and all kinds of ways to search the queue. There are a number of keywords which have a defined meaning in Trac. They're commonly used to manage the workflows of specific tickets as well as the release tickets. And they're used to generate reports as well. Keywords should not be thought of as generic tags, because tags aren't really necessary. They kind of have a more specified approach. So I want to look at status-based keywords first, and then I'll go into action-based keywords. So status-based keywords, there's the good first bug. This signals that a ticket would be a good starting point for new contributors to get used to the process before tackling more complicated tickets. Now, this doesn't mean it's necessarily good for novice coders, but for people novice to the issue queue itself. Has patch means that someone has proposed a solution to the ticket and attached a patch, and it's ready for review. Needs patch, the ticket has been reviewed and found desirable to solve and marked as specifically needing a patch, or the submitted patch doesn't work and needs to be redone. Needs refresh, that basically means a submitted patch no longer applies cleanly to WordPress. Maybe the code base has been modified since the last time, or a new development version is on the horizon. The patch needs to be merged and resubmitted. Has unit tests, the ticket has been reviewed. We do want to solve it. And the latest patch contained unit tests. Like needs unit tests, this keyword indicates the proposed changes constitute a high risk of causing other issues, which is in relation to needs unit tests, because when you introduce patches to code bases, they could introduce new bugs. When a ticket's marked needs unit tests, it means it's reviewed. We want to solve it, but we need to write a test to make sure that the functionality and the patch kind of mesh with everything else. Needs docs, inline documentation is needed. Needs codex, that means the documentation in the codex needs updating or expanding. Generally, that keyword is removed from the ticket once the codex is updated. Needs and has screenshots, patches and commits that change UI, the user interface, really need screenshots. Testing for responsive layout, things like that. Sometimes you can't always say what you want in words, and a picture is necessary to convey the meaning. Early and close. Early, this keyword is usually only used by committers. It signals that the ticket is a priority and should be handled sooner than later in the release cycle. Whereas close is the ticket is a candidate for closure. It's often had a second or third or fourth set of eyes on it, and it's just ready to sort of disappear. And then there's some action-based keywords. Reporter feedback, it means the person who reported the first issue or bug, they're looking for feedback from that person. A patch has been submitted since they reported, and they want the person who reported the issue to make sure that the work that has been done makes sense and passes the expectations of the reporter. Dev feedback, they want a response from a core developer or trusted member of the development community. And because we're open source and we really rely on, we really want a solid code base. Often we want second opinions. And so this tag is used when another person is needed to express the opinion about the problem or solution. Basically call for another set of eyes or another person to collaborate with. Needs testing, one or more people are needed to test the solution. A patch has been attached. So they would like people to comment with the patch file name that was tested, how the patch was tested, and what version of WordPress was used to test. Oftentimes, you want to make sure that you include the SVN revision number, or if it's a beta or alpha release candidate, make sure that you're very specific about what you tested. When a designer is needed, perhaps to create like a prototype of the suggested changes of the UI, they'll tag it with needs design. Needs design feedback, a designer should review what people have posted and talked about and give feedback on that proposed change. Needs dev note or has a dev note, if a change is significant, if it brings about new functionality, they're refactoring a lot of code, or it includes something that's like a real big breaking change, we usually want to have dev feedback. And then privacy is important too, so input is needed from the core privacy team. So we would tag something needs privacy review. And then once that input has been done, it moves into has privacy review. Needs copy review and has copy review, a copywriter is needed. And then once a copywriter has suggested the changes, those tags change. Commit, the patch has been reviewed and tested by a trusted member of the development community. And then the patch is considered good for release. Then it moves into, it's marked commit. There's the tag I18N. And for those of you that aren't aware, I18N is a numerum for internationalization. This is used in the only late in the development cycle to track potential string changes for translations. So they call upon translators to make sure that all the strings can be translated. Fixed major, this is also used late in the development process. It indicates that an issue has been fixed in the next major version and needs to be merged back into the branch that's the existing version. And dev reviewed, after a patch has been created for a release, each change needs to be reviewed. So these are some of those keywords that we'll use. And a lot of times it's okay as a beginner to not know what keywords to use, because the people working with you and the folks who have accepted that ticket into the development cycle will kind of, most of the time they'll use these, they'll move the issue along with these keywords. So we talk about issue queue etiquette. And in the WordPress community, they have a handbook called Navigating the Community. And I'm not going to go too deep into this because this is more responsibility for everyone else, but start with the handbook. The link is makeWordPress.org core handbook tutorials navigating the community. So just start here. They do meet twice a month for new contributor meetings in the core WordPress Slack channel. So kind of check out that WordPress core Slack channel and you'll get kind of the hang of when the meetings are. And there's also a content calendar you can subscribe to. Like I said, I'm not going to go in too depth. I kind of pulled out a couple of the big things I like to talk about when we work in the issue queue. And one of them is being, what do some of these words mean? So release cycles. The Gutenberg releases an update every 2 weeks where core operates a little bit differently. This can make keeping up with Gutenberg versions a little bit confusing, but if you go into that guide, it'll point you in the direction of how the release cycle works. And now some useful terms: contributors, committers, components, component maintainers, and teams. These terms are all WordPress core specific. And they're used to describe all the different roles people have that help move the project forward. A contributor is someone who contributes to WordPress, whether through code, design, documentation, all those. I had a presentation earlier in the day on all the different ways you can contribute back to Drupal or to WordPress. It doesn't have to be core and it doesn't have to be code. So those are called contributors. Committers are a type of WordPress contributor who earn the community's trust and have been given the keys to sort of, quote unquote, commit code. These are the people who play a leading role in making final decisions for WordPress core. Components are focused, well-defined areas of core that anyone can get involved with. Component maintainers are contributors who kind of take stewardship to that particular component. And there are also teams that exist on top of the component teams. You can find each team along with other ways to get involved in this handbook. There's mobile, design, accessibility, support, CLI, hosting, Tide, meta. Just kind of dig into that handbook to find more ways. And we'll talk a little bit about what we call situationals, about how to communicate with different teams, how to pave your communication pathways and really help with clarity. Remember that there's a ton of nuances and it never hurts to have a second opinion when we're talking about core contributions. So say you need more attention on a specific issue. We want to make sure that the issue or the pull request is properly labeled, with the appropriate team so people can find it. You want to share it in WordPress Slack channels, in the pound core or pound core editor or JavaScript. That way, specific people have attention to it. You can raise the issue in an open floor meeting. If you can't attend a meeting, you can add it to the agenda, and it can be covered for you. And if you're in touch with community members, you can also have them raise the issue during the meetings. Using group handles when you communicate with people in Slack, or in GitHub. Not everyone's Slack handle translates to GitHub and vice versa. So be aware of the different teams' naming convention in the two platforms. Say you want to introduce a new idea to the team, you can DM different community members sharing the initial idea and, try to garner some interest. This can be helpful to do it internally first before opening it up wide. And if you don't know who to direct message or private message, just drop the idea in Core Editor or in Core, and folks can point you in the right direction. Sometimes creating a GitHub or a Trac ticket that explains your idea or your feature request. That way it can be shared in the open floor of an appropriate meeting, and for a larger scale, something, maybe a blog article might be best. If you have an issue and it's kind of gone stale and you need a little bit of momentum, again, share it in the open floor of a meeting, and if it's related to Gutenberg, include the issue or topic in the What's Next section of the Gutenberg posts. And some helpful hints. Create and update your WordPress.org profile to include relevant information, attach your employer, attach your title, perhaps sharing a WordPress origin story. That's a great way to connect with others. Create a Drupal.org Slack account if you don't already have one. That's where most of the conversation happens these days. IRC, not too many people use anymore. The main form of communication is through that, WordPress.org Slack account. Connect your GitHub account to all the different places. Make sure people are aware of your GitHub handle. Sometimes your GitHub handle is different from your other handle because you've come from a different community or whatnot. Share what you're working on with people. This allows others to get to know you and what you're working on over time. The more people who are privy to your ideas, the more collaboration you'll have. Okay, so let's take a tour. If you have any questions, Joel, you can ask now, or we can just kind of bumper car along the track. I have a couple of links open. Let me full screen this. Okay, so this is what happens when you just sort of navigate to the track. It's a page. It doesn't say a whole lot, but it does give you a lot of links to different places you can check out information. Here's a link. This is core.trac.wordpress.org. You can see, I talked about the contributor handbook. There's a link here. How do we use Trac? How to create issues? What to do if you have a security problem. So this is a good page, like with a hub of a lot of information. And so what I've done is well, if we go back here, I need to move the thing out of here. If we go over here, there's a great little dashboard that takes you to all kinds of different blogs, takes you to the handbooks. You can select this and go to a ticket page. This page is also really nice, as it sort of gives you a starting point. There's a dashboard for things that you're involved with, a quick link on creating a ticket, what tickets you've already created, what patches you've submitted, tickets that you're following. So if you forget what you're working on, or say you worked on something a year ago and you want to see if it's been fixed, you can, select any of these to see. you know, you can come down here and you can see issues that already have patches submitted. Sometimes reviewing a ticket is a good first step beyond creating the ticket, because maybe you don't necessarily know how to write the patch, but you want to get involved in the queue. Reviewing a patch is a good way to start off. You know, tickets without a patch, you can look at it, say you know how to do it. You can, you know, attach your patch. And this is a great link, the good first bug for new contributors. So we'll select that. And it kind of gives you an idea of why these tickets are selected for this. Again, they aren't necessarily easy. It's that the tickets are designed in a way and written in a way that a new contributor can navigate them a little bit more clear. So again, we were on that dashboard page. And we went to good first bugs for contributors. Okay, so from there, when we select, if we just go to the search page, you know, we don't get a whole lot here, you know, so I'm not sure why I came here. Tickets. To do a custom query, you would do /query. And this is a page that I showed during the demo. And this is where you can attach your filters, which is nice. You can see the track. I don't have any modifications on this. This is how it's set up by default. You can see each ticket is defined per row. You've got your ticket number, a summary, what status it is. You can see that this ticket's assigned to somebody to work on, or assigned to work on in general. Who owns this ticket, like who's working on it next, the type of ticket, you know, here's that enhancement or feature request or bug, what the priority is, and what the milestone is. So this is the way it's kind of set up by default. And up here is where you can add more to the tickets. So I can select what columns I want. So if I wanted to add component. Oh, great. If I want to add, let's see if one of these other ones works. Oh, I'm not on HTTPS. Okay, I'm not sure what to do about that now. So let's go into these filters. So we talked about how we can kind of refine our search a little bit more. And we talked about all of these different things like component, you know. So once you select the component field, you can see that you can narrow your search a little bit more. So each filter that you add, oops, sorry, focuses, you know, modified. So you can hone in pretty deep and pretty specifically what tickets you're going to work on. And if you look at the WordPress core handbook, you know, let's put this down to minimal size. You know, here's that handbook I talked about. So it gives you all the different things that you can do. You know, more specifically, you can dig down a little bit deeper and find exactly what you're looking for. So there's the 1,000-foot view. So if we want to like explore what an individual ticket looks like, there's a couple of ways you can get there. You can get there from the link on the ticket or get there from the link of the summary. So we'll look at an individual ticket and kind of look at the different components a little bit closer. So here's that ticket number, and that happens sort of auto-magically as people submit the tickets, and once they're accepted to work on, a ticket number gets assigned to them. And that ticket number is good for referencing later. And it's also good to kind of keep that in mind because some of the naming conventions for our patches use that ticket number as well. And that's in a future workshop. You can see that this was opened 13 years ago, but was last modified a year ago. So again, you know, it goes back to that being patient. Not every not every issue has the highest priority to get into the release cycle, you know, but say the person who opened this, you know, wants to get more clarity on this or move it forward, they would, you know, broadcast it in those different channels like I talked about, you know, raise it in a meeting, you know, mention it in the Slack channel. So you have a short and concise title. You have who it's reported by. You know, if you want to look and see who this person is, you can select them and you can, you know, see other tickets that they've opened, but it looks like they've only worked on the one. You know, they've issued it a high priority. They talked about what version it was. So as a new contributor, you wouldn't necessarily work on this one, because I always recommend that new contributors work on the latest development versions of WordPress. You know, on a current version, you can see that this is 2.3. You know, it's been tagged that it has a patch. They've defined the component, you know, here's that description. So the description again is a summary of what's going on. You know, they give you a path to replicate. You can see what patches have been submitted. That's what these diff files are, or they could be in the form of .patch files, depending on how you format it. So you can look and quickly see all the attachments. And then this change history is the conversation that I talked about. So you could just scroll through here and you could see how people feel about this and how it goes through the release cycle, you know. And then, you know, say you want to work on the ticket, you know, after you've scrolled all this, you know, there's a place to add a comment, and then there's also a place to change your metadata as well. So that's sort of like the broader look of the issue queue. Any questions?
I have some, perhaps just restating back to you the things you just said, questions.
Sure.
So I found an issue that I feel like I could potentially contribute with from this needs or good for first time contributors, which is super awesome. This particular one has a patch already. So I would assume that the next best step would be to test it.
Right.
Like spin up a new WordPress install, apply that patch, and then test it. Is that right?
Yes. So, you know, making sure that you read through all the comments, understand the scope of the patch, you know, once you make sure that you have the version that it's asking for, or if it's like tagged for the latest or the beta version, you know, making sure you have that correct version on your machine. Apply the patch, which you can do with get apply -v, or you know, with wget, or whatever mechanism you use to apply patches. If it's a UI, you know, making sure that you explore the UI and seeing that the changes that people made are there. If it's a code issue too, making sure that you review the code and that the code follows best practices and best standards, running it through a code debugger or an IDE where your plugin defines that you're on WordPress. And then, you know, after you've reviewed the patch, making sure that you are specific in your comment. I tested this, these are the steps I took, these are the results I had, and then attach any screenshots.
Okay, cool. One other question I had was, I see when I look at the first link on Good First Bugs, they are marked as unclaimed. And I'm sorry if I missed this detail. I know in Drupal and things, you don't claim, you don't assign a ticket.
Right. And I think that, and I could be wrong about this because I don't work too much with core, but or with the bugs, but because these are first bugs, they have it's okay to assign yourself, that way efforts aren't duplicated. These are standalone tickets, you know, they're developed for kind of the latter approach where, you know, they want to make sure that people understand the concept and they don't want to duplicate efforts. So if you do assign yourself, make sure that you make a comment saying, I've assigned myself this ticket. I'm actively working on it, you know, and then let's say a week and a half, 2 weeks, 3 weeks go by and you haven't been working on it, or you don't have enough progress, or you have to do something else, just make sure that you unassign yourself and that you make a comment and upload what you have worked on.
Okay, cool. Thank you. That helps a lot. I will pause with the rest of my questions in case
Okay.
some.
And what's nice about the WordPress community is even if you've done a step wrong, everyone is really nice and kind of walk you through things. And so I like to tell folks, don't be afraid to say that this is the first ticket you've ever worked on, you know, because then people will give you a little bit more guidance too, you know, like, oh, Tara, I saw that you did this, but, you know, maybe next time do it this way, you know, and just allowing yourself to have that vulnerability really goes a long way too.
Cool, cool. This has been incredibly helpful. I have never found myself in a place in the queue that I could understand what to do next. And it's really exciting to be there.
And that first bug tracker queue, I think, is splendid because there's some bugs that have been there forever, but it gives you that permission to kind of, you know, for lack of a better word, play around in it a little bit because they know that, well, it's under the general assumption that if you're going to take one of those tickets, you are a new contributor, you know? So, and then too, what I've done too in the past is I've actually like presented myself in the Slack queue and been like, okay, I want to work on this. Does someone have time to mentor me? And I've had someone mentor me through my tickets as well. So that's nice.
And that's just in the core channel on WordPress Slack?
Yep.
Okay, cool. I'm always a bit shy maybe to jump in there. Maybe I shouldn't be. Maybe that'll be my new place to hang out.
But again, for everyone, we'll talk about how to create an issue more thoroughly on the 15th. You know, we're gonna find a bug, really go through all of the different components, all the different metadata, what you can do as a contributor versus a committer. And we'll do that both for WordPress Trac and the Drupal issue queue.
Okay, cool.
And we'll talk about triaging issues for Drupal. I have to admit, like, and this is an important part too, admit what you don't know is I don't know how they triage issues in WordPress core. So I can show folks how to triage issues in Drupal.
Sure, that makes a lot of sense. Well, awesome. I know my brain is buzzing with new stuff. And I don't know if we have any more questions. But thank you. As always, this has been really helpful. And we will be, I'll be posting the recording in our forum for folks who, you know, if you want to share this with anyone. And yeah, we'll have more workshops coming up on the 15th.
Thank you.
Well, thank you so much, Amy June. We always appreciate your time and your expertise.